I know I pretty much sound like a broken record, but I will say this is my last video talking about any of the Marvel mechs coming for the rest of the year. I feel like a lot of the videos that I've done lately have just been complaining about the Hulkbuster and the Black Panther mask, when in reality, I've said that I've liked them a lot more than other people have. But one thing I did want to discuss is the new Hulkbuster, the V2, and ask, is it actually a better idea to do a Hulkbuster in this scale than the big $500 one? As a lot of people are saying it is. And oh, this video is brought to you by Squarespace. More on them later. So the new Battle of Wakanda set. Most people are saying that this is far superior than the $500 Hulkbuster. It comes with 4 minifigures, a brick-built mech, all for a price roughly around £45. Comparatively, the Mark 1 Hulkbuster comes with 1 minifigure, is £500, but granted is a lot bigger. But due to its size, suffers from a lot of the problems being very gappy, a lot of the pieces fall off after time, and the overall proportions just don't look very good. This has led a lot of people to believe that the smaller one is going to be better than the bigger one. But are they correct? Well, obviously comparing a £45 set and a £500 set, you're going to get a lot of differences. And if I'm honest, I think it would be silly to compare the two. But there's got to be a reason that people are saying that this one is better. Obviously, I think a lot of that is to do with the price. It's a much smaller Hulkbuster, therefore it can be a lot cheaper. Also, because it's a playset, it comes with a lot of minifigures. But other than those two things, I don't really see where the advantages come from. Now that the dust has settled and first impressions period is over, I must say that looking at a lot of the pictures of this Hulkbuster, the more and more I look at it, the more and more I start to hate it. Now don't get me wrong, I think it's a better rendition of the Hulkbuster than the first one they released, but taking a look at pictures like this, you can see it really suffers from a wide shoulder problem. And although I think the chest section is much better than the previous version, these shoulders and shoulder pads look way too big to fit on this kind of a model. And although I am glad that they didn't attach the shoulder pads to the top of the torso and they attached them to the arms, you can see by pictures in the film that he doesn't really have shoulder pads. His shoulder pads look more like they're built into the arms themselves than sort of pauldrons that sit on the shoulders like these guys. But you might say, it's just a 45 quid model, who cares about the proportions? But then we're complaining all the time about proportions and how they don't look right on things like the $500 set. And although yes, on a $500 set, I would imagine that you'd probably be putting in a lot more effort than a $45 set, but at the same time, it doesn't make this model any better than the big one just because it's a cheaper price if the proportions are still wrong. And that leads me on to the top of the chest section. But before that, this video is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one building platform that helps you design clean and professional looking websites. I've been using Squarespace now for an incredibly long time, as my website tommycbricks.com is all made using Squarespace. And anybody who's been to my website to check out my instructions would know how clean and professional a website can look from Squarespace, all without knowing a single line of code. You can use their award-winning templates to help you create the exact website you want, and with tools like their commerce tools, multi-contributors tool, and professional looking checkout page, allows you to pretty much do whatever you want with your website. The new year is coming up and maybe you want to start your own business, and to get seen online, trust me, you're gonna need a website, and Squarespace is the place to do that. I've told multiple of my friends to use Squarespace just because I've been using it so long, not just because I'm sponsored by them. Squarespace truly does have my approval, and if you use my link in the description, you get a 30-day free trial of Squarespace, and if you use code TommyCBricks at checkout, you'll get 10% off your first website or domain name. There's no better time to start making your own website and to use Squarespace to do it. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this one. Back to the video. Now, although I love the part usage that's used here to create that really unique shape of the Hulkbuster Mark II, it's heavily reliant on stickers, and I would love to see more brick-built detail in this portion of the model. And like most Hulkbusters before this one again suffers from the sunken head treatment, something we may be able to fix because it's on hinges, but a notably consistent problem with a lot of the Hulkbusters that have come before this one. Another problem I've noticed with this one is that the hips are way too far apart and would look much more proportioned with the on-screen counterpart if these legs were closer together. That or the abdomen was maybe the correct shape. Unfortunately, probably just due to the way that it's built, is they might not have been able to make it sturdy enough, as that is one consideration to take because kids will be playing with this. And unfortunately, those ratchet joints are much harder to conceal than something like a ball joint. That really doesn't excuse the fact that the legs are just too wide. A problem that the larger Hulkbuster also suffers from, but I guess it is more acceptable to have this kind of a problem on such a small model as opposed to a big one. However, saying that, and this is where I think this video comes in handy, a member of the community known as Ransom Fern, who builds a lot of Hulkbusters, has built this Hulkbuster as well, and although I know he's not massively happy with the model, I frankly think think the model looks amazing in comparison to something like this, and even though his model might be double the piece count, it is one of those weird cases where it's actually cheaper to buy this many bricks on Bricklink than it is the actual set. Now don't worry, I will be comparing these two when that new Hulkbuster does eventually come out, because making a video on these custom sets at this kind of price point I feel is the sort of dividing line, and like I say, when LEGO can produce a set that's really good and a mock builder can build something that's just as good for cheaper, you start to question what to buy. So I will do a video on displaying both of them and putting them against each other for price, stability, stuff like that. But as for the set, there are some positives that I do think this Hulkbuster has over some of the other ones. For starters, I think the legs are finally the right chunkiness. Even the legs for the big 500 one seemed a bit too thin compared to the model that we saw on screen, and it's really nice to see that this Hulkbuster is getting a nice toe bend, and this box art on the back looks very nice in showing off this model. The figures, however, I'm not 100% sure on yet. I need a bit more thought for it, because at the end of the day, you are basically just getting two figures with this model, because the Chitauri Outriders, or whatever you want to call them, if you ask me, are worse filler than battle droids, and would have much rathered figures like Vision, or Captain America, or Thor, or Rocket, and called this set like the Wakandan Charge, or something along those lines. But I do understand LEGO want to include some sort of enemy for the Hulkbuster to fight, and I'm very glad that we got that in some form of minifigure, rather than some form of stupid side build that would have taken up piece count. As for Okoye, this is a great set to put her in, and I'm glad that she's getting a spot in this set. Not a lot of people have her, as she's only really appeared from one other set apart from the Black Panther 2 sets, and that set was 2018, so I'm glad that we're getting a newer version of her at a slightly cheaper price point. As for Bruce Banner, I'm really not happy with this Bruce Banner. I don't understand how LEGO finds it so difficult to get a minifigure to look like Mark Ruffalo, but once again, I don't think this is it, so we'll have to hope for a Bruce Banner figure in a CMF or something like that, where they may be able to give him a dedicated hairpiece or something along these lines. So do I think doing a Hulkbuster is better at this scale? Well, yes. But then I also think doing a Hulkbuster at £500, even though it sounds ridiculous, could have been an awesome set. And I think both of these sets suffer from the same problems, being that the proportions just are not correct to what we see on screen. It's just because this one is much cheaper and smaller, the problems aren't so obvious. Therefore, people are saying that it's better. However, I am glad that they have done this as its own solo set, as opposed to doing one big final battle set for like £120, because although I really do think you should have got a bit more with this set, I'm glad to see that it's just the Hulkbuster on its own, and the only real improvements I can see upon this set, unless you're talking proportions, is pretty much just minifigures. And although I don't think this model is necessarily quote-unquote better than the $500 one, I think it's better because you don't have to spend as much. And I think that's the benefit of doing Hulkbusters at this scale. Even if you do get it wrong, it's easy to go back and do it again, whereas with a $500 one, you kind of have to get it right first time. And this is why this set is a $550 disaster, because not only does it suffer with this, it suffers from a multitude of other problems that you can find out in this video. And trust me, I don't think it's getting off lightly. I hate being ill.